Hello everyone, this is going to be lab number 6. Actually, this is the final lab that we introduced some new concept, and we continue from where we left in lab number 5. Our task was given a database. So in this example database, we have customers, products, and customers can buy a bunch of products. We would like to interact with this database through user interfaces, and in LibreOffice Base we do this through forms. In each form we can have a bunch of different elements. So if we remember what we have done from lab number 5, if we open up the main form, for example, we have the labels were giving information to the user. We have buttons. For each of our buttons we can attach a macro, and whenever I click on one of these buttons, on the backend, this macro will run. It might open or close some of the forms. It can populate my list boxes. For example, this is a list box. It is used for displaying a set of items, and I can choose one of these items as well. So whenever I change what's selected in this list box, I can also run some macro. So macros can be attached to clicking on items, clicking on list boxes, etc., or whenever I change the value of something. Most of the time we would like to change something whenever I click on a button, but for the list boxes as well, whenever I change the selected value, I might trigger a function. And those functions, if we go to our main window, in here we have tools and macros. Under here we have edit macros. If we previously created a macro for this database, which we did, so this is the lab 5 database, it's the final version. We start using this file, but we renamed it as lab number 6. So remember, we discussed that how to create the macro page from scratch, but now since it's already created, I need to go through macros and then edit macros, and this will open up my macro page. Remember, with LibreOffice Base, we can store macros on our computer, or we can attach them to the ODB file that we save. And it is important, if you are going to share this file with your group friends, for example, or when you are uploading this file on Moodle, you need to include these macros into this database file. So this is by default showing the macros that are on my computer. But if I click on this Lab6 database file, under there we have standard and this module 1. If I double click on this module 1, these are the things that we coded last time. So for example, button add product. Whenever I click on the button to add a product, I call this function. It's a subroutine. Remember, in BASIC we have functions and subroutines. Subroutines are similar to functions, but they do not return anything. Functions are whenever we need to return some value, and for buttons we don't need to return something. We included some useful functions to make the life easier. So some of them are returning values, therefore you will see the name function for them. So this is a function, get value from SQL, for example. Actually we are going to look at this function today, but let me quickly find another function. So get value of index, you give the form name, the control name. Controls are list boxes or text boxes, etc., and the index of the item. Remember, we were using this delimiter, this separator symbol, to list a bunch of fields in a list box, because by default, if I check in a list box, I can show or project just one column. But if I would like to show multiple things, we were combining this string into just one string, and whenever I need to get one of these fields, we were using this function. So these are the things that we already discussed, and today we would like to have some more functionality. For example, whenever I choose soda, I'm able to update its price. So I give some success or error messages. I can return back to the menu. I have the transfer page. So this was the last thing actually we did. We were able to choose one user and another user. And for example, James is going to send money to Joe. And how much? Let's first write 200. So customer James does not have enough credits to send 200, so maybe let's send 20 in this case. If I click on send, it says successfully send it to Joe. James has less money now, and Joe has plus 20. So in here as well, in this form as well, I could have some return back to menu button. This time we are going to first introduce the last function that we did not use. So let me get into there. So far we are able to run SQL queries, right? To run an SQL query, I have the following subroutine: subquery SQL. I write my SQL query as a string, and in this string you need to be careful because the string is in between double quotations, but in base, for attribute names and also for table names, we need to include double quotation as well. And to do that within the string, I need to use the escape character for the string, which is 2 of double column symbols. So for the attribute names and for the table names, I need to include these 2 double quotations. So that was one thing that we need to be careful about. So this subroutine runs the given SQL query, and this query is going to be an update, delete, insert query. But for the selection part, if I want to show some result in my list box, for example, we had SQL to control function. So given this list box, I can list the items that are the results of this SQL query. So that was one option. But sometimes we would like to select a bunch of rows or select a row based on an SQL query. And for that value, we do not want to project them inside a list box, for example. We would like to just check the value. And this is going to be a concept for the login procedure. But for this task, we are going to use this getValue_from_SQL function. So this is actually in the backend is going to use the dlookup function, and we are actually if you look at, we are using some library called access to base, because we can directly use some base functions, but these are kind of more complicated. And as TAs, previously we were teaching this in Access, so we are more familiar with the setup of Access. So therefore, it is better for us and better for you as well, because these functions are kind of easier. And if I come back, the dlookup function accepts the table name and the field name plus a condition. And this condition is, for example, if I'm looking for some student, this condition is going to be maybe the name and password of this students. So this SQL query, actually, we give the field name and table name separately. And for the condition part, we write the where condition. We are going to do it in a minute, but this condition is going to include the attributes of this table. And then it is going to find some rows. And for those result sets, it is going to return the first one. So what I'm saying is, with the dlookup function may return nothing. It is going to return null in that case. Or it might return just one value. And that one value is this attribute, this field that we just wrote for the given condition. And it might have more than one results for this condition, but it is going to return the first one that it matches. So we are going to use it in a minute. So for example, there is also some example usage that we give in here. So sorry for that, I just went to another part. So this is one example. So for the table name, this is going to be a string, but since this is the name of the table, I also need to include these double quotations. So it kind of looks crowded, but it's not complicated. Then I give the field name. In the lookup function, these are reversed, but to make it easier to read, we wrote the function as table, then field, then the condition. So we write the table name, the attribute name that we would like to return at the end, and then the condition. So for the condition as well, since this is the payment attribute, so this is going to be my whole string. But for this string, most of the time I'm going to attach some values. For example, this 6,000, it could come from an attribute, for example. In that case, I can just write the attribute name here. Therefore, I'm appending this to the payment. So it could have been like this as well within the string. I could have just written 6,000 here. But if I want to use parameters, then this is showing me how to do it. So I'm going to copy this example usage. So let me create a new subroutine here. So remember, we give a name to this subroutine. Let's call it test get something like this for now. And this was my function. So this is going to return the value. And let's also print this value to show it to the user. For now, the student is not a valid table for our database. So if I run this now, I get an error. It says the function execution failed. It doesn't give too much information. Maybe if I search this error code, it might give more information. But if you are writing something wrong as the parameters, be careful about that. So that's what I would like to say. In our database, let's check. In our database, we have the customer table. So for the name of the table, I'm going to write customer. And within the customer table, I have these columns. Again, it's better to have the uppercase or lowercase matching. So for example, if I would like to get the ID, let me write it as ID with all uppercase because it is like that in the database. And now for the matching part, let me say it for the name and password. So this is going to be my condition. Let me delete the existing condition. The third parameter. So the first parameter is the table name, then the field name as a string. But since this is an field name or an attribute name, I need to include the two double quotations. And then the last one is my condition. You can think it as the part that comes after var keywords. So let's say var name is equal to something, and since name is going to be an attribute, I need to include those double quotations. The first one is showing me the string starts, and then I have the attribute name. Let's say I want the name to be equal to some value. Let's write it directly first. Let's say for Joe, and the password is pass for Joe. So I want this to be equal to Joe. Remember the single quotations for the string inside SQL. And I want, so if I come back here, it's called password. The attribute is called password. I want the password to be equal to the string named pass. So I will get rid of these empty places so that those were to show that in a more clear way. So this is my condition. For this customer that I would like to find the ID of, I want its name to be Joe and I want its password to be equal to pass. So now if I run this query, it returns me 3. So 3 is the customer whose name is Joe and whose password is equal to pass. So if I wrote the password incorrect, for example, whenever I run this, it says inadmissible value or data type mismatch. It's actually because we are trying to print a null value. So therefore it's better to get this return value first. So let me call it return value. So I get some return value out of this function. And then if it is not null, if return value is not null, then I would like to print this return value. So remember, we used this if-else statements previously, I guess. It should have been like that, but okay, in here we used it. We wrote if condition then. So let me actually correct it. If this is the case, then print the value, else print cannot find it, for example, and if. So this is going to be the end of this part else. So let me run it now. It says cannot find it. So from here I know that the return value is null for this given name and password. So if the password was also correct, I need to save it, but it is saying cannot find it. Let me check it then. So we wrote return value, it should match. If it is not null, then we should print this return value, otherwise it was going to say cannot find it. And actually now let's try to print this return value without any if and else. Maybe we are doing some mistake in if-else conditions. So for this part, let me comment them out for now. So whenever I run, I see 3. So it is not null then. If it is not null, then I should print its value. But maybe with this is null part, I might be doing something wrong. Let me check it. Basic compare null, for example. So we would like to check whether it is null or not. And to do it is nothing. I guess it could be the thing that we are looking for. Let's do that then. So in here to check it, I should write is nothing. So is nothing. If it is nothing, if it is null, then I should write cannot find it. In the other case, I should write the return value. So now let's try it. It's the correct one. It shows 3. And if I wrote the password incorrect, for example, actually we are again on that other part. Maybe it's not returning null, but it might be returning some other value. So let's check it. For the dlookup, or actually we are saying nothing. Let me try this basic null check. So now we would like to say is nothing. So that's this part. And if maybe do we need to separate this one? Data type mismatch. We come to here again. So this return value it looks like it doesn't recognize whenever I say nothing. Let's check the get value parts in this here. So we set the value as the return result of this dlookup function. Actually, we can also check this access to data, access to base documents. So we are using the dlookup function here, and it is going to show up here. So dlookup, and for the return value, maybe not the example first, this one is better, I guess. So if no record satisfies the criteria, it will return a null, it says. So the value is actually null in that case. And in here, I guess I should be able to check it like this, if it is equal to null. But the thing is, I guess okay, now we are done, I guess. Okay, so the problem was in this library that we are using, the value is actually not the null value of the basic. I guess this is some special value for within this library. And to check it whether it is equal to null or not, what I need to use is, I just need to say return value equals to null. Then we say cannot find it. Otherwise we print the return value. So now with this function we would like to be able to pass attributes. So instead of saying here Joe and pass, actually before that let me first show one more thing. So if this condition, if I can actually choose it, so let me cut this parts for now. If this condition was something like ID is larger than 1, for example, this is my condition. So since ID is the attribute, I need the quotations. This is one valid condition. If I run it, it says 2. It returns more than one results. So in my customer table, I have users with ID 1, 2, 3, and 4. And this returns true for the ID 2, 3, and 4. But since the lookup function gets the first result, I just see 2. So that was one important thing that we need to remind, because with the dlookup function we are actually looking for just one entry. So that's the important part. So I would like to have attributes for the name of the user. So let me call it maybe the customer name. For the customer name, I would like to have some parameters. So for example, that's going to be Joe. And for the customer password, I would like to have some other attribute, and this is going to be for Joe the password was pass. And I would like to attach these inside my SQL query. And how to do that? So instead of saying Joe in this position, I would like to finish my string at this part. I would like to append this attribute, and then I would like to append this rest of this condition. So the customer name comes in between, and I need to use this append symbols, and I would like to cut this string or finalize this string and start another string after that. Actually at this part as well, it is better to have one empty character. So I append the customer name. So if I run it, now I get some problem. What's the problem? So it actually shows me the conditions. So for the Joe part, if you can say it, the Joe is going to be the value of my string. So since it's the value of my string, I also need the single quotation. So that's the problem in this part. And with my customer name, for example, this might come from some text box, and for the value that I get from that text box, I would like to append single quotations to it. So this is going to be something like this. So this is a string that just includes the single quotation character, and I attach this before and after the name of the customer. So now if I run it, it shows me 3. So I could have included it inside my string here as well, but the plan is that instead of writing Joe directly here, I'm going to get this value from a text box, and for the value that I get from the text box, I would like to include these single quotations before and after. And for my password as well, I need to use the similar logic. Instead of writing it directly, this is going to come from some text box, and I would like to attach these symbols before and after it. So whenever I run it, I see 3 now. But now let's create some login page, for example. So I'm going to go back to my main window. Under forms, I would like to create a new form. So I'm going to create form and design view. And in here, I need a text box for the name and another text box for the password. I need to also include some button for the login operation. And the user needs to know what to write or what to type in these parts. Therefore, I'm going to also include 2 labels to say that, okay, you enter here the password, you enter here the name, username. So for this label, if I double click on it, I can change or set the label property of it. So let me write name for this one, and for the other one, this is going to be for the password. And then, since I would like to receive the value of these text boxes, I need to give them some useful names. And for the name of this text box, let's call it uname for username. And for the second one, let's call it the name upass for the user's password. And actually, in some position here, if you would like, you can also hide the character. So it says password character. So whenever I'm typing something, I guess this may show the character that I enter here to the user. So I just wrote the star symbol, and I can just include 1 symbol here for the password character. And let me close that part and Ctrl S to save this form. Let's call it login form. So I'm going to save it. I'm going to show it. I will close it and open it by double clicking on there. I'm going to type the name here, and whenever I write the password, it shows it as the star symbols, but actually it contains my text correctly. So this is not some necessity, but sometimes people would like to do it like that. So then whenever I click on the push button, or let's call it login as well. So I'm going to close this, right click on login form, click on edit to edit it. So I'm going to double click on the button, and for the label, let's write login. And remember, we had this function here, or the subroutine, let's call it login. And I will use Ctrl S there. And this time, what I would like to do is, I would like to get some value from a control. So to do that, we have the function called, so actually these are the functions that I wrote, but I need to remember their names. We have the function called get value of. So this is the function that we need to use. So I can write get value of. The form name is going to be login form, and the control is going to be the text boxes that we just wrote. So for the name of the user, I need to get it from the text box called uname, and that value will replace Joe there. I include the single quotations before and after that value. And for the customer password, it is going to do the similar thing, this time for the text box called upass. And then I get the values for these attributes. I try to get the return value using this getValue from SQL function. For the customer for the customer table, I would like to retrieve the ID field for these given conditions. And if I am able to return nothing, if what I get from this function is null, this means that maybe the name or password is incorrect. Name or password is wrong. Otherwise, we are able to log in with this information. So in that case, let's print some welcome message. Welcome user ID. And then let's say I would like to append this ID. It gets from this return value. So I can append this ID here as well, this return value. So let's save it. And coming back to this page, whenever I click on this button, so I need to open the properties of this button. Under events, I have mouse button pressed. Whenever I press my mouse button, so I will assign a macro, and that macro is going to be included in this database file under module 1. It is called login. So I will click on OK. Whenever I click on this button, run this subroutine. Other than that, what I need to do, actually nothing. Let's save this form and let's close it. I'm going to open up this login form. And now let me write some non-existing customer information. It says name or password is wrong. I don't know which one is wrong, but one of them is actually wrong, it says. So for the name, let's write Joe, and for the password, I'm writing pass with all small letters. If I click on login, it says welcome user ID 3. But remember that whether these are case sensitive or not is depending on how you set up your tables. So if I write Joe with small j, it says name or password is wrong. So that's one thing to be careful. And sometimes maybe I do not type the name at all, and in that case it still says name or password is wrong. Maybe it could be a good idea in the macro part. So let me come back to here. In the macro part, if these fields are empty, maybe I can give a different message. So for example, let me write another if. So let's say I would like to get the value from this part. If the return value is equal to null, so I'm going to again check it. It might be not like that. So what I mean is that maybe it returns an empty string. I need to check this part, but let's keep it like this for now to check it, to test it. Actually, to test it, maybe let's first write it like this. Print empty. So I'm going to just try it for now. I save this. I come back to here. It's empty. Okay, actually it returns some string. Can I check it like this? Let me try. I saved it. Returning back to this part, if I try to log in, it says empty. Okay, so I can, for a text box, if it is empty, it returns an empty string. It doesn't return null. So it returns an empty string, and to compare whether it is the empty string or not, I can use this this equal sign. I check whether it is equal to this empty string or not. If it is empty, then I would like to say that name cannot be empty. To log in, you need to insert some name. else I can still check something, right? I can write an else if. Did we wrote it? I guess in basic it might be called elif. Let's try to, it's not elif basic profilleri, but okay, basic code. Or was it in Python? Let me quickly check it. Basic if else. So the thing is that I don't, okay, it's called else if in here. Actually what we wrote was correct, but we don't need to include the empty space. Else if, what I would like to check is, so the user might write some name but might leave the password empty. Then I would like to say that password cannot be empty. Another warning message. Else, then I can try to log in, right? So this whole part is now going to be included in my else. So else do this whole thing, and I need another and if here. So this is the one for this other part. So if name is empty, I say it cannot be empty. If password is empty, I say it cannot be empty. Else, given that two of these are not empty, I get my attributes. I use the get value from SQL function with my conditions. And if it is null, it means that name or password is wrong. If it is not null, then I can display some welcome message to the user. And for example, I could go to some other page. And in that other page, for example, let me quickly do that. So this was my login form. And from that part, after going through the login form, I would like to go to the main form, let's say. And inside my main form, let me edit it. Inside my main form, let me create some label on the corner. And in this label, let me actually double click on this label, and I would like to, okay, let's maybe instead of a label, let's make it a text box. And for this text box, let me give a name. Let's call it UID, because I would like to show the user's ID that logins. But I want this to be not editable. So for the read-only value, if I choose it as yes, I guess this will do the job, but let me check it. So if I double click on this one, for this label field for the text box means what's written on it. Actually, I'm not able to write some text here, but let me quickly check it whether I can. Whenever I open the main form, I cannot write any value inside this text box, but I would like to also check whether I can do it with code. So this is going to be my test subroutine, and in here I would like to set the value of inside the main form, or was it the main menu? It's called main form. Okay, inside the main form I have UID text box. I would like to set its value to, so let me quickly check the order of the parameters. The final one as the value. I would like to write test in that box. So I'm going to run this from here. Sub procedure function procedure not defined, it says. Did I wrote it wrong? Let me try to find it out. Set value of is wrong. Okay, so the correct one should be set value to. Okay, some naming conventions that we made up. So if I come back to here, now it is saying test in the text box, and I'm not able to edit this text manually. With the code, I can change what's written in there, but I'm not able to type anything using the keyboard to there. So that's one thing that we would like to achieve actually, because we would like to write the user's ID to that text box, for example. So returning back to my main form in edit, I can attach some label here saying maybe you are user, and then we see which user we are with the ID. And remember, this was called UID. Whenever I log in, I would like to show my ID, or maybe I could also, if I retrieve the name of that user, I could also show the name of that user. So I'm going to save it. Let's actually include the name as well. So if you want to do that, you will have some example for it. So let me also include, okay, I need to create a new text box. So for the name part, let me double click on it, and for this one, for the name, let's call it uname. Again, this is the same name of the text box, but it is in different forms, so we do not have any problem. But for the read-only part, again, this is going to be read-only, because I don't want user to edit that. It is going to be determined by the login information. So then I will get this function or get that code part and remove that subroutine whenever I am able to log in. So welcome user ID something. In this part, I am able to log in. Let's say we are able to log in. What I would like to do is, actually, I would like to first open some form. Open F. Which form I would like to open? It is going to be the main form. I would like to open the main form. And at the end, we can also close form. I can close this login form, because maybe we don't need to log in as a different user, for example, or we might have some other button to log out, and then we will return back to our main form. And in the main form, I would like to set the value of the UID to the return value, because this return value contains the ID of my user. So in here, I would like to set the return value because it contains some valid UID. And then I would like to also do the similar thing, this time for the text box called uname. So I have a text box called uname there, but this time, instead of saying it is equal to return value, I would like to find out the name of this user with the ID that is contained inside my return value. So let me write username here for my attribute. I would like to get this username using the same function. So for the username part, this is going to be my same function. I can still use the customer name and password information, but some different thing that I can do is, so I'm using the get value from SQL function. It is going to retrieve this time the name from the customer table. I can check according to the name and the password. Actually, one thing is we already know the name of this user, actually, right? So if I look at here, if I'm able to log in with this information, the customer name is already known. So I can set this value directly to my customer name. But let's say I would like to also get the surname of this user. To get the surname of this user, with the same get value from SQL function, I can for my criteria, I can select according to name plus password, and I can retrieve the surname. So in here, not the name, but I would like to retrieve the surname of this user. But my condition can also be this. I can also say, I want the ID to be equal to this value, and that value is going to be, so this is my ending part of the string. I would like to attach my value, and that value is actually this return value that we just found out. So I want this ID to be equal to this return value. And since this is a number, I don't need to include the single quotations. Then I have the user surname out of this function. Then the thing that I write into this text box called uname is going to be customer name plus the user surname. So this is one single empty character or space character in between. And then I can close the login form. And do I need to write the message? Let's also at the end welcome the user, saying welcome user, or maybe it's better to refer to user as welcome, and then customer name and the customer surname, for example. So it's just, I need one more E there, surname. So let me save it, returning back to my login form. Actually, one last thing in the main form as well. Let me open up in edit view. Let's include one button to log out. So in here I will include a new button in some part, and this will be called logout. And what I need to do for logout is actually I need to go back to the main form, right? Or the login form, sorry. So I will create this new sub. This is going to be for logout. This is the end of this sub and sub. And what I want to do here is to open the login form, and I would like to close the main form. It was our main menu. Then we are going to return back to the other part. So now let me close this macro page. For this button I need to double click under events, mouse button pressed, event. I would like to attach or assign a macro, and that macro is included in our module 1 in this database file, and it's called logout. I will save this one, close this. Let's start from our login form. So this is our, let's say, actually for your projects as well, we need to log in as some users, etc. In the first implementation stage of your project, you just create the tables, you create the relationships, and you populate your tables directly. You just write some values there. For the implementation stage 2, you choose one scenario. So you are given in the functional requirement document, you are given 3 different scenarios for each of the topics. You choose one of them, you implement it, you create it using forms. So we would like to see it through forms. So you can always go to your tables, show some tables, you can edit this data. But in the scenario, while you are following the scenario, we want you to use the forms. So for example, this could be the similar thing for the final demo as well. In the final demo, you are going to show all 3 scenarios. So the scenarios are not that complicated. Actually, you can finish it in several hours, I guess, the whole thing, if you like listen to the labs, etc. So let's start with our login case. So let's say in our scenario, maybe it was saying login as a customer. Then in my login page, if I click on the login button, it says name cannot be empty. So I'm going to write some name. Then I click and it says password cannot be empty. So these are some success and error messages. We also expect such messages in your project as well. You don't need to like include a message to every part, but we want to be able to see these kind of messages in some several parts. And since you are doing the demo, just put them according to your needs. So for example, while I try to log in, I would like to show these error and success messages. So in the demo, I'm showing this. So I'm entering some wrong values here because I would like to show these messages. And then let's log in with Joe, and the password is pass in this case. If I click on login button, so we have a problem. Let's check this problem. It says value 3.0 is invalid for the property value. So whenever I try to put the value 3 here, it cannot put this value because it's not a text. Actually, in the text boxes, what we store is text. But if I come back and look at my macro, what I try to put there is actually coming from get value from SQL function, and it returns this one, and it returns the UID, right? Actually, we get it at this part. So from the customer table, I get ID, which is a number. So I'm trying to set the value to a number, which is not possible. I would like to make it a string, and I can append numbers to string. I have my empty string here, and then I append the return value to it. So the problem was that in the text box, I cannot directly put the number there. I should first convert it to a string, and to convert it to a string, I just append an empty string at the beginning. Now with Joe and pass, if I click on login, it says welcome Joe Sand. So Sand is the surname of Joe, and in here the single quotations are there because we added them. Remember, if I actually go back to my macro page, in here, remember, for my customer name, I'm including these single quotations because I'm going to use this value within my get value from SQL function as a criteria. Therefore, the single quotation was there, and since I'm also using the same attribute, it shows the single quotations. But other than that, that's fine. We can also just use the same function to get the name without the single quotations, or we can just get rid of the single quotations, etc. If it is like that, that's also okay. So if I click on OK, now I see my name here. This is my user ID, but I'm not able to directly edit it. I cannot change the value. And let's say I would like to log out and log in as a different user, and I don't remember all the usernames. In the demo as well, you don't have to. You can just go to your tables, look up the customer table. For example, I have James with password 123. Let's log in as James then. So going back to my login page with James and with 123, I can log in. I cannot actually. Okay, name or password is wrong. So let's try to check it. In the customer table, we have James, right? And the password, did I wrote it wrong? 123. Name or password is wrong. Let's maybe try to log in as a different user. Maybe, is there any empty space here? No. Let's try Diana and okay, we have some problem then. With Joe, why there is no problem? What was the password of Joe? It was called pass. Okay, then I guess the problem is that now, maybe that was good to have it. Whenever I write some value just containing But actually for the Diana, it also includes letters. So with Diana, let me actually just copy and paste the values to be sure. So Diana, and then for the password, this is the password. Name or password is wrong. So let's go back to the code. Tools, macros, edit macros. Actually, before saying name or password is wrong, I would like to print what I'm writing there to be sure. So I would like to print the content of my criteria. I would like to print this part to find out what mistake I'm doing. So that's included there. Going back to the login page. So I need to log out first. Okay, that logout page was something wrong then. Okay. So this is what I wrote there. Diana and pass. So pass is wrong actually. Okay. A very silly mistake, I guess. Okay, for the password part, we forgot to change this. So this is written as a text, but I don't want to write this as a text. I would like to get this value. So this print line was for debugging. I just removed that. So the problem is that I wanted to use this customer password attribute, but in fact I was not using it. I was just using that value passed there. So I would like to append my password as an additional thing in this part. So now I save my macro. Let me close all these open forms and pages. So for the customer page, let's just keep this one open to know who are our customers. So going into the login form. So let's try to log in as James with password 123. So James, password 123. If I click on login, I'm able to log in as James. So let me log out. I log out. While logging out, I also need to close this main form. So that's one final thing that we forgot to do. Going through macros and then edit macros. I would like to edit my macro in here. While I log out, I would like to open the login form and close the main form. So that was one final thing that we forgot. If I open the main form directly, it doesn't make much sense because I don't have the user ID there. But if I go through the login form, so Diana, H, uppercase H, 3 and Y. If I click on login, now we logged in as Diana. If I log out, let's say I do not enter anything, name cannot be empty. I cannot go into the main form. Main form is not already open. The previous user logged out. But then let's also log in as Greg. And password is 748. Then we are able to log in as Greg. So we are actually done with the things that we need to know. And for your specific scenario, for your specific project, you just need to use this knowledge to create different kind of forms. And we logged in, remember, we can go to other pages and we can also get the information about the user ID while we return to this main form again. So remember, when we go from the login form to this main form, we write this user ID and username. Actually, what we might want to do is to keep the main form open so that we know which user is this user. Then whenever I go to the transfer page, for example, So the normal way of transferring money is we just transfer from our account to other accounts. So we don't choose some random person's account to transfer money from that account. In this case, we can, if we keep the main form open, we can use the ID of that user. And actually, in the next video, we are going to do a similar thing.